Welcome to Book Buzz Reviews and Summaries. Book, I Am Another You, A Journey to Powerful Breakthroughs by Priya Kumar. A three-part journey through the book's core. Part 1, The Crack in the Mirror. Imagine this, a woman who has everything on paper. Success, applause, a name that opens doors. Yet wakes up every morning with a hollow drum beating inside her chest. That woman was Priya Kumar. And that hollow drum was about to explode her world into 1,000 pieces. One ordinary evening in Mumbai, after delivering yet another thunderous motivational talk to a room full of people who called her inspiring, Priya came home, kicked off her heels, poured herself a glass of wine, and looked in the mirror. What stared back was not the fire-breathing speaker the world adored. It was a tired stranger wearing her face. In that moment, something snapped. Not dramatically, not with screams or tears. Just a quiet, terrifying click. She heard a voice inside her say, "If this is all there is, I don't want it." That single thought terrified her more than failure ever had. Within weeks, life began stripping her bare. The big contracts slowed. The phone stopped ringing the way it used to. The applause faded into a dull echo. And instead of fighting to get it all back, Priya did the maddest thing imaginable. She let go. She canceled appearances. She turned off the noise. She booked a one-way ticket to the Netherlands with no plan, no contacts, only a whisper in her heart that said, "Go. Something is waiting." That something turned out to be a rustic farmhouse in the Dutch countryside and an enigmatic shaman healer named Vasant, who ran what he simply called the process. When Priya first walked through the wooden gate, she was still the city girl in designer boots, carrying Louis Vuitton baggage, both the suitcase and the emotional kind. She laughed when Vasant asked her to remove her watch. "Time doesn't matter here," he said. She smirked. Of course time matters. She had a life to get back to, but there was no getting back. Not yet. The very first night, the group, 9 strangers from 9 corners of the world, sat in a circle on the wooden floor. No talking, no phones, just breathing. Priya hated it. 10 minutes in, her mind was screaming. 20 minutes in, her legs went numb. 30 minutes in, something strange happened. The screaming stopped, and in the silence, she heard the drum again, louder, clearer, ancient. That was day 1. What followed over the next 14 days was nothing less than a controlled demolition of everything Priya thought she was. They made her dig a grave in the frozen earth, 6 feet long, 2 feet deep, and lie in it, while the others shoveled dirt over her body, until only her face showed under the moonlight. She was to stay there until she forgave every person who had ever hurt her. She stayed 4 hours. She cried, she screamed, she bargained with God, and then, when the last name left her lips, like a sigh, her own name, something inside her died peacefully in that grave. When they pulled her out, she wasn't the same woman who went in. They blindfolded her and walked her into the forest at 3 a.m. with nothing but a small drum. "Follow the beat that feels like home," they said. She stumbled through thorns and mud for hours, terrified, furious, lost. Until the drum in her hands and the drum in her chest began to beat as one. When she tore off the blindfold, she was standing in a perfect circle of trees she had never seen before. And she knew she had found her way not by sight, but by feeling. They made her stand naked in front of the group, not for shame, but for truth. Every scar, every stretch mark, every part she had hidden under power suits and perfect posture was suddenly bare. And one by one, the others told her what they saw. Not the polished speaker, not the brand, but the raw, trembling, magnificent woman. For the first time in her life, Priya believed she was beautiful. Not because of what she achieved, but because she simply was. And then came the firewalk. You've heard of firewalking. You think it's about mind over matter, about proving you're tough. It's not. 20 feet of burning coals glowing orange in the night. Vasant looked Priya in the eye and said, "The fire will only burn you if you carry fear in your heart. If you walk as love, it will cool beneath your feet." She was last in line. She watched strong men cry and quit halfway. She watched a woman twice her age dance across like a child on grass. And when her turn came, Priya stood at the edge, barefoot, heart hammering so loud she was sure the flames could hear it. In that moment, every voice that ever told her, "You're not enough," rose up like a chorus. And she answered them, out loud, fierce, final. "I am another you. I am the same light, wearing a different face. I am enough." She stepped. The coals were cool as moonlight. She did not run. She walked, slowly, reverently, across the fire like it was a red carpet laid out for a queen returning home. When she reached the other side, she fell to her knees and sobbed, not from pain, but from the staggering realization that everything she had ever searched for outside herself had been waiting inside all along. That night, lying in the tiny attic room of the farmhouse, Priya wrote in her journal for the first time in years. "I am not Priya Kumar the speaker. I am not my awards, my fears, my past, my masks. I am another you, and you are another me." A peaceful, in that chorus. We are one. Part one ends there, on her knees in the grass, covered in ash and tears, laughing like a woman who has just remembered she can fly. She has buried her old self. She has seen her own reflection in the eyes of strangers and recognized home. Now comes the terrifying, exquisite task of living it, going back to the world that once owned her, and choosing, every single day, to remain awake. Part 2. The Return of the Queen Who Forgot Her Crown. She came back to India a changed woman wearing the same skin. Mumbai airport hit her like a slap. The noise, the heat, the drivers shouting, "Madam, taxi." She stood on the curb with one small bag, no assistant, no entourage, and felt the old Priya rise like a ghost wanting to grab the wheel again. Bookings were waiting. Emails were screaming. The world wanted the old show. She almost gave it. On the very first night back, she put on the red power suit, the high heels, the bright smile, and walked into a conference hall of 500 people who leapt to their feet, clapping before she even spoke. The applause was heroin. 10 minutes into the talk, she was flying on autopilot. Old jokes, old stories, old fire. The audience was eating from her hand. Then she saw him. In the third row, an old man with snow-white hair and eyes that looked straight through every mask she had ever worn. He was not clapping. He was not smiling. He was simply watching her the way Vasant used to watch. Like he could see the grave she had lain in, the fire she had walked, the naked truth she had faced. And in that gaze, something inside her collapsed. Mid-sentence, she stopped talking. 500 people froze. She stood on stage in silence for what felt like years. Then she did the most dangerous thing a speaker can do. She told the truth. "I'm sorry," she said, voice shaking. "I can't do this anymore. I can't sell you motivation wrapped in shiny paper when I have just learned that everything you're looking for is already sitting inside your chest, beating, right now." You could hear a pin drop. She took off the microphone, laid it on the stage, and walked out. Contracts worth crores were canceled the next week. Her manager aged 10 years in one afternoon. The media called it a breakdown. Hashtags were cruel. Old friends whispered that Holland had broken her brain. Priya did not explain. She disappeared again, this time into the heart of India itself. She went to the banks of the Ganga at Rishikesh with nothing but a sleeping bag and the drum she had carried through the forest in Holland. For 40 days, she sat on the ghats at dawn, watching bodies burn, watching widows beg, watching backpackers search for something they couldn't name. She fasted until her cheekbones frightened her in the river's reflection. She chanted with sadhus who owned nothing but the air in their lungs. She let the river take the last pieces of the woman she thought she had to be. One morning, an old boatman rowed her across the water before sunrise. Halfway across, he stopped rowing and said, "Didi, why do you keep looking back at the shore you left? The river has already carried you forward. Turn around." She turned. On the opposite bank stood a little girl in a torn dress, barefoot, holding a marigold garland, almost bigger than she was. Their eyes met across the water, and in that child's unblinking stare, Priya saw herself at 7 years old, before the world taught her to be small, before success taught her to perform, before fear taught her to hide. Something broke open. She started crying so hard the boatman thought she would capsize the boat. When they reached the far bank, she stepped out, knelt in the mud, and let the little girl place the marigold garland around her neck. The child touched Priya's wet cheek and said in perfect Hindi, "Don't be afraid, Didi. You are another me." That sentence became her new heartbeat. She began traveling, not as the famous speaker, but as a barefoot pilgrim with fire in her veins. She slept in ashrams, on railway platforms, in strangers' homes. She started touching people the way Vasant had touched her, with eyes that saw too much and hands that refused to let you lie. In a dusty village in Rajasthan, a woman who had been married at 12 and beaten for 20 years grabbed Priya's hand after a tiny gathering and whispered, "I want to live before I die." Priya took her to the desert that night, built a small fire, and made her walk across burning coals the way she herself once had. The woman danced through the flames, laughing like a girl who had just been born. In a slum in Delhi, a boy who stole wallets to feed his sisters asked Priya, "Can someone like me ever be big?" She blindfolded him, spun him around until he was dizzy with fear, then placed a drum in his hands and said, "Find your way home." He walked straight through chaos and stopped exactly in front of his little sisters, arms outstretched, tears cutting clean lines down his dusty face. Word spread, not through posters or promoters, but through transformed lives. People started leaving their old worlds to find her, not for selfies, but for burial sites in their own hearts. One night in the mountains of McLeod-Ganj, under a sky so clear the Milky Way looked like spilled milk, Priya gathered 30 such seekers around a bonfire. She was no longer teaching from a stage. She was sitting in the dirt with them. She looked at each face, tired, terrified, hopeful, and said the truest thing she had ever spoken. "I am not your guru. I am another you. Everything I awakened in myself is already asleep inside you, waiting for permission. I am only here to remind you who you forgot you were." Then she did something that shocked even the ones who thought they could no longer be shocked. She stood up, walked into the fire, sat down cross-legged in the middle of the burning logs, and stayed there while the flames licked her skin without burning her. 30 grown men and women screamed, tried to run forward, but she raised one hand and they froze. For 7 minutes, she sat smiling in the heart of the fire until the wood collapsed into glowing ash around her. When she stood and stepped out, there was not a single mark on her body. This is not a miracle. This is what happens when you stop being afraid of your own light. That night, every single person walked into the cooling embers after her. Not one was burned. Something new was being born. Not a movement with a name, but a remembering. People began leaving their titles, their marriages that suffocated, their jobs that buried them alive. They began living raw, ridiculous, magnificent lives. And everywhere they went, they said the same thing. End quote. I am another you. Priya herself no longer had a home. She moved like wind. Sometimes she was seen sleeping under trees in Varanasi. Sometimes she was spotted dancing in the rain in Goa with street children. Sometimes she simply vanished for months and no one knew where. But the drum kept beating, louder, wider, wilder. And the world that once cancelled her now couldn't look away. Part 2 closes on a single image. Priya standing alone on a cliff in the Himalayas at dawn, arms wide, hair whipping in the wind, marigold garland still around her neck months after the little girl placed it there. Behind her, the sun rises like a fire that will never burn her again. She is laughing. She is crying. She is finally, gloriously free. And somewhere far below, in cities and villages, in boardrooms and slums, in broken hearts and brave ones, millions of people wake up feeling a strange new drum in their own chests. They do not yet know her name, but they are beginning to remember theirs. Part 3. The day the world caught fire and did not burn. The drum had become a roar. It was no longer inside one woman's chest. It was inside millions. It beat in offices where people suddenly stood up and walked out of jobs that were killing them. It beat in marriages where someone finally said, "I love you, but I will not shrink anymore." It beat in the hearts of teenagers who refused to let exams decide their worth. In the fists of farmers who chose life over despair. In the quiet prayers of old women who decided forgiveness was not weakness. And the world noticed. Governments called it unrest. Newspapers called it a cult. Religious leaders called it blasphemy. Corporations called it a threat to productivity. They all tried to name it so they could control it. They could not. Because you cannot arrest a remembering. One morning in Delhi, a minister's wife left a 22-room mansion wearing only the cotton sari she was married in, took a train to Varanasi, shaved her head on the banks of the Ganga, and began feeding lepers before sunrise. When journalists found her, she smiled into the cameras and said, "I am another you. I just stopped pretending I was someone else." The video broke the internet. Within weeks, thousands of people began doing the same, leaving mansions, Mercedes, corner offices, not to become sadhus, but to become human again. They gave away money, titles, jewelry. They kept only what they could carry in their hearts. The panic in the old world was delicious, and in the middle of this beautiful chaos stood Priya Kumar, no longer hiding in mountains or villages. She had come back to the cities, not to speak from stages, not to be worshipped, but to walk among people the way rain walks among dry earth, quietly, inevitably, changing everything it touches. They invited her to the biggest stadium in Mumbai. 80,000 tickets sold in 6 hours. The organizers expected the old motivational razzmatazz. They built a stage 10 feet high, installed laser lights, brought in drums and dancers. Priya arrived barefoot. She walked straight past the stage, past the VIP seating, past the cameras, and stood in the center of the ground where the grass was worn thin by football games and stampeding fans. She carried nothing. No microphone, no script, only the marigold garland, now dry and brittle, still around her neck. 80,000 people fell silent without being asked. She raised one hand, palm open, and began to speak, not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. Her voice carried on the wind the way truth always does when lies have been exhausted. "I did not come here to save you," she said. "You were never lost. I did not come here to lead you. You were never followers. I came only to remind you of what you already know in the deepest part of your being. I am another you. Every face you hate is your own face wearing a mask of pain. Every face you love is your own face wearing a mask of joy. There is only one of us here. Then she did something no one expected. She lay down on the ground, flat on her back in the dust, arms spread wide like a child making angels in the snow. And she said, "Now you do it. All of you. Lie down, right where you are." 80,000 people, rich, poor, famous, unknown, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christian, atheist, lay down on the ground as one body. The stadium became a field of human stars. From the sky it must have looked like the earth itself had opened its heart. For 20 minutes, no one moved. No one spoke. Only breathing. 80,000 lungs breathing together. One breath. One body. One remembering. Then Priya stood up, covered in dust, and said the last words she would ever speak to a crowd. "Go home now. Not to your houses. Go home to yourselves, and never leave again." The stadium emptied in perfect silence. No pushing, no shouting, no selfies. People simply walked out into the Mumbai night, carrying something ancient and brand new in their chests. That was the last time Priya was seen in public. Some say she went back to the Dutch farmhouse, and now tends a small garden with Vasant, who is very old and smiles more than he speaks. Some say she lives in a tiny village in the Himalayas, where children who have never heard her name run to her knees calling her Amma. And she teaches them only one lesson: how to listen to the drum inside. Some say she became the wind itself, moving from heart to heart, whispering the same 4 words until the whole world remembers. I am another you. Years later, travelers still report strange, beautiful things. A businessman in New York suddenly gives away his fortune and is found laughing in Central Park, barefoot in the snow. A soldier in a war zone lays down his gun in the middle of battle and walks toward the enemy with open hands. Both sides lower their weapons and weep. A politician stands up in Parliament, tears off his tie, and confesses every lie he ever told. The entire house follows him into the street, where they burn their party flags and embrace like brothers. Whenever these stories are told, someone always asks, "Who started this?" And the answer is always the same: no one. And everyone. It was never about one woman. It was about the moment we all stopped running from ourselves. The book ends not with a full stop, but with an open door. You are holding that door right now. Close this book. Place your hand on your chest. Feel it. The drum is still beating. It never belonged to Priya. It always belonged to you. I am another you. Now go live like it. 3 deepest takeaways from the book. 1. You are not broken. You are buried. Everything you are desperately searching for, love, power, peace, purpose, is not missing. It is simply covered by layers of fear, roles, achievements, and old stories you mistook for truth. The whole journey is not about becoming someone new. It is about digging up the grave of who you already are and letting that person breathe again. The fire only burns what you are ready to lose. Every terrifying thing you face, loss, humiliation, failure, naked truth, even literal fire, is not there to destroy you. It is there to burn away what was never you in the first place. When you stop being afraid of your own light, nothing in this world can harm the part of you that matters. There is only one of us here. The stranger you hate, the child who loves you, the enemy across the border, the guru on the stage, the beggar on the street. They are all you, wearing different costumes. When you truly realize, I am another you, forgiveness becomes unnecessary because there is no other to forgive. Compassion becomes as natural as breathing. And real, lasting change in the world begins the moment we stop seeing separation. Carry these 3 truths in your pocket. They are lighter than any degree, richer than any bank balance, and stronger than any fear. Now, walk differently. The drum is already beating inside you. Thanks for listening to Book Buzz Reviews and Summaries.